Yeah, so I guess I'll take the floor now. And a quick comment as I get started here. I think it's incredible to see kind of how everything got operationalized with MIMO over the couple of years. I really came in wide-eyed and wanted to get involved, and it's nice to see the level of engagement is increasing. And so I mention that because I think if you're even somewhat interested in any of the topics that are being talked about today, get involved early. Some of you have decided that you're going to go to LGO, great decision. Some of you are still thinking about it. Hopefully if you're into what MIMO has to offer, it can help sway you in the right direction. But certainly get involved early if you can. And also just want to say congratulations on getting accepted. It's a big milestone. And when I was in your shoes, I put down a set of goals of things I wanted to accomplish at LGO. And I mentioned before that a big part of that for me was trying to figure out what was going on with AI and machine learning. If you want to go back to business school, especially if you want to go to LGO, you most likely want to be in some kind of executive position, maybe at a tech company in the future, if you're not already. And a big part of that is utilizing data in the right way. And it's also going into different industries that are traditionally not very good at utilizing data. And I think MIMO offers a really interesting way to figure out how we can apply those intense data skill sets and be really effective managers in the midst of a revolution where everybody is starting to use data. So keep that in mind as you're going through LGO. And for me, that's why the first thing I did was I took an AI class. During the summer, you take a class that introduces you to some of the topics of machine learning. And that really blew my mind and I wanted more. And so you're going to do an internship depending on, the company that you get matched up with. Hopefully if you express your interest, you'll be able to get an internship that aligns with some kind of MIMO type project. And for me, I worked at private equity firm, but they owned a small manufacturing company that was trying to understand what they could do with data analytics, AI, machine learning. And this company is a CNC machine shop, for lack of a better term. And if you're not familiar with that, you're basically cutting metal, making chips fly on parts, and we make those metallic parts, we assemble them into larger assemblies, and we sell them to OEMs, Boeing, Lockheed, Northrop, and some others that I mentioned before. But it can be quite an inefficient process because a big part of that is telling the machine how it needs to cut that metal. And that process of creating the machine program is what it's called, takes quite some time. So it can take a week or it could take up to 6 months. If you see some of the parts that we make, they're quite complex. So we typically err on the side of needing to spend a lot of time in the programming process. And so what I wanted to do was look into ways that we can use AI machine learning to reduce that time. And what's interesting about it is that it's a completely, I shouldn't say that nobody's looking into it. People have been looking into it for a couple of decades, but the approach I took was quite unique, respective to everything that I've seen in the literature and conversations I've had with Bruce and other people that have looked into the problem in the past. So it was nice and refreshing to take a look into that and kind of apply everything I learned in class into this problem. And I definitely did apply the things that I learned in class. So taking the AI class that I took in the first fall, and then taking the machine learning class that I took in the semester after that, these were concepts that stuck with me as I was thinking about how I can formulate my thesis and actually try to provide value to the manufacturing company. I'll save everybody the technical details of kind of how I built everything. I'm happy to talk about that offline if you're curious. I assume we'll share some contact information at the end. We'll figure out a way to keep in touch. But one other thing I want to mention is, in addition to the internship work, I actually, as I said, I took a class in machine learning in the spring of my first year, and you do a project in that class. And for that project, I built this algorithm that I called finger lines, which is what Bruce mentioned earlier. And it's a method to recognize features in CAD files. you're not familiar with the term CAD, it's like a 3D model that you would see. And that problem is a really important backbone to the industry that I'm working in with CNC machining for a lot of reasons. I won't go into them now, but it was a really refreshing look into, how can I take a CAD file and use my own unique way of analyzing the data and trying to predict what the features are in that file. And that was a lot of fun. So I got to write a paper. I think with a little bit more work, it's actually something I could publish, but it certainly was a good segue into my internship when I was kind of extending on the feature recognition problem and going into how we apply that into manufacturing. So I think it's great what MIMO is doing, getting more people involved to see it more operationalized. And as I said at the beginning, get involved early. I think the concepts that MIMO is offering are really groundbreaking, and it's really a good idea if each of us understands it to some extent, because we're going to be the people that are in charge of making decisions for very influential companies, and we need to do so with a mind of how we analyze data and improve manufacturing operations. So yeah, I guess that's the end of my little spiel here. I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody's curious about any of the technical details or kind of the way I was thinking about MIMO as I was going through the 2 years that I had here.